First of all, it's important to remember why we're here today. We're here today because we don't want to have another pandemic like this. I think it's important that we recognize that 1 million Americans have lost a loved one, and they're still looking for closure. We have 15 million Americans with long COVID. And perhaps if we knew the origin of COVID and the development, maybe that would give us a clue how to treat us. I want to start with Dr. Quay and go back to the diffuse grant for just a second. This is a grant by EcoHealth and Peter Daszak. Recall that Peter Daszak is David Moran's BFF. And that grant was denied, but yet it lays out a framework for the development of COVID-19. And you went through 6 or 7 several reasons that are absolutely consistent, that they said they would do X and they did X. And what are the chances of all those things ending up in a COVID virus?
Yeah, well, again, just as a reminder, so they said they were going to go to a particular spot in southern China to get a virus. They were going to make sure that it had diversity from SARS-1 of about 25%. They were going to put it into humanized mice to enhance its ability to recognize the receptor binding domain. They're going to put furin cleavage site in a very particular spot. You know, out of 13,000 letters in the spike protein, they said in the grant they were going to put it at a spot called the S1, S2 junction. They said, and so all of those were found in SARS-CoV-2. Its nearest neighbor is from the same area. It has a 99% binding affinity for the human receptor. SARS-1 jumped into humans. It only had 15% of the epidemic changes it needed to become epidemic.
What do you think the chances of all 6 or 7?
I've quantified it because I like statistics, and it's 1 in 1.2 billion.
So a 1 in a billion chance all that comes to fruition. There were some comments on that grant in the margin. So Dr. Barrick, North Carolina, developed the technology for the protein spike. He taught Dr. Shi. He gave them humanized mice. Again, this was all funded with USAID grant money as well. What were some of the comments in the margin you think that are significant?
Well, this is important because the folks told DARPA, we're going to do this research in North Carolina under very high safety conditions in the grant. That's what they wrote. The marginal comments in drafts that were only obtained through FOIAs said a different thing. Daszak said, hey, we're gonna shift this over to Wuhan because it'll be cheaper, faster. We'll get a lot more done that way. Barrick says, boy, if U.S. scientists knew this was going on, they would think this is crazy. This is in the marginal comments. So they, in a way, they weren't truthful with DARPA in the grant.
So Dr. Barrick, you along with Dr. Fauci, are the father of gain of function, knew that other scientists in America would have a fit if this was being done here.
Yeah, and again, so fast forward to January 2020, these two scientists, Daszak and Barrick, sitting down with the sequence of SARS-CoV-2, and a computer would know within 1 hour, this thing has all the features of what we proposed in that grant. And the fact they either didn't tell anybody or the people they told didn't do anything about it meant that that human-to-human transmission was we were not aware of that, and asymptomatic transmission we were not aware of. This is the first new respiratory virus that's asymptomatic.
Great. Let's come back. I'm going to use that. Come back to that point in just a second. You know, we went through what I call the smoking guns that really show beyond a reasonable doubt that this virus was made in a laboratory in Wuhan, China. It was synthetic. You know, everywhere from the geography of where it shows up for the first time to the fact that there was virus already spread to multiple continents by the time the wet market break occurs. They never have found the intermediate species. With SARS and MERS, it took months to find an intermediate species. Anyone that says the raccoon dog is the intermediate species is just laughable science. No progenitor viruses. And the timeline, they were developing a vaccine already November 2019. Dr. Shi has taken down the DNA lab banks in September 2019. She takes down another the lab bank here in this country, maybe March of the next year as well. But of all the smoking guns, and this is the hardest to explain to people, is just the genetic makeup of this virus. And you pointed out the protein spike. The protein spike alone would be like a person. The protein spike that fits into a lung cell would be like the chances of a person walking in the room with the key that fits the lock on those doors. I mean, it was a perfect protein spike. You mentioned the furin cleavage site. There's other spots. But I want to talk about the ORF8 site for just a second. Dr. Quay, what's the significance of this ORF8 site?
So ORF8 is a protein that's down near the right-hand side of the virus. It is not in the final virus. It is secreted into the bloodstream, and it does two things. Early in the infection, it blocks interferon expression, so you don't sweat, you don't have a fever, you don't show the symptoms of an infection. And later in the infection, it blocks what's called antigen MHC presentation. So we learned from HIV that a virus that can block the ability of pieces of the virus to be presented to the immune system is a virus that is very hard to make antibodies against, very hard to fight against it. Two master's theses during 2015 that have only been published in Chinese, no papers came from it at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, created a synthetic cloning system for ORF8. Right. So gain-of-function research around things that make viruses asymptomatic and things that make them not be able to make antibodies to are beyond the pale of what Dr. Ebright has said in terms of the civilian use.
If I could, Dr. Quay,
no civilian use.
So really, this ORF8 is a synthetic link sequence, never found in nature, and they place it in here. Right? They place this link in here for the purposes of the two cardinal sins, the cardinal sin of asymptomatic virus and then transmission without that symptom as well, and the inability to make an immune response. I mean, that's the cardinal sins of gain-of-function research. What purpose would there be if you're wanting to develop vaccines? Is there any civilian purpose, or is this, in fact, a bioweapon?
I can't say it's a bioweapon because that's in the mind of the person that made it, but it is highly unusual, highly synthetic. They were doing synthetic biology around it, and its two functions are quite remarkable with respect to what kind of research you would do in the civilian world.
Dr. Ebert, is there a possibility that it could have been a dual purpose, that they could have been used as a bioweapon?
So the original SARS virus, SARS-CoV-1, is a Tier 1 select agent in the United States. So it is in the group of pathogens and biological toxins that our federal government has identified as having high potential for use as a bioweapon in biowarfare, bioterrorism, or biocrime. It, by definition, therefore, according to our federal government, is a bioweapon agent. It is not a bioweapon, but it is an agent that potentially could be used.
Is there any good reason to put this in the virus if you're developing a vaccine?
I would return to my general comment on gain-of-function research on potential pandemic pathogens. That research has no civilian practical application. Researchers undertake it because it is fast, it is easy, it requires no specialized equipment or skills, and it was prioritized for funding and has been prioritized for publication by scientific journals. These are major incentives to researchers worldwide, in China and in the US. The researchers undertake this research because it's easy, they get the money, and they can get the papers.